Are media directors becoming obsolete? Now this is thoughtful. Hello, I'm Trevor Lai in Shanghai. To cope with the complex nature of China's media environment, media directors are faced with three difficult roles: buying negotiations, tactical planning, and strategic planning. Companies may wonder if it's realistic to look for all of these skills in one person. China's talent crisis compounds the problem. Should companies hire a media technician and educate them about branding, or give brand experts a crash course in media buying? A few weeks ago, we examined these issues with Dios, a media consultant who managed P&G's media planning and buying business in Greater China. This interview was filmed before we upgraded our studio in Shanghai, so the backdrop looks a bit different. We hope you enjoy hearing from one of China's foremost media experts. Do companies still need a media director? Or is this role becoming obsolete?
No, I believe companies need a media director. As you mentioned earlier, the skill sets of a media director are divided into three pieces: the planning, the operations, tactical planning, and the buying and negotiation. Okay? Certainly you need a person to integrate those three buckets of work, right? Not just for the process, but as well as managing the different stakeholders. For example, for planning, you need somebody who can manage the brands, the brand managers, and the consumers, okay? For the tactical planning or operations, you need someone to manage the agencies, the media partners, media vendors, from TV stations to digital media vendors. For buying negotiations, you also need to then manage the actual transaction. Okay, so it's not so much the control over those three buckets, but the oversight and the integration, and obviously the single point of accountability. So to answer your question, yes, I think you need somebody who has knowledge and expertise in those three disciplines.
So what's the ideal background for a media director these days then?
Well, that's a good question, because when I first joined P&G 14 years ago, P&G was still beginning to create this position, this role. So there was no benchmark, there was no model to learn from, right? So it's pretty much learning as you go along. And then here in China, obviously, you see the rapid change in the media environment from TV to branded entertainment to digital to even magazines, right? And the consumer is changing so rapidly and getting more sophisticated. So ideally, you'd want a person, obviously, on the hard technical aspects, knows the basics about media planning, media buying, and the operations. At the same time, somebody who can learn and who has a knowledge of branding and obviously the consumer. Okay? All those three components have to work closely together.
So would you say that actually the demand in terms of the candidates' capabilities is much greater now than when you first joined?
Oh, definitely. Much, much greater now. Not just, certainly here in China, okay? It's because of the sophistication of the consumer and all the media options available. At the same time, the brands, whether they be from multinationals or local companies, have higher volume goals, have higher value share goals, okay? What's happened now is we need to step back and say, okay, with today's changing landscape, should there still be a media director? Some companies have moved and called it a communications director, which really integrates then the marketing side of it together with the media planning and buying side of it. But it's not an easy task to find somebody who can qualify for those requirements.
So, I mean, talking about your time running P&G's media business in China, right, can you highlight some of the biggest challenges that you faced, especially as you were really defining the role, as you were working? Right.
Certainly the biggest chunk of my time when I was at P&G was on the buying negotiation. We bought across 300 stations in China. We bought across many other out-of-home and internet vendors. And always, China is still, I believe, a buying-led market. It's all about the ROI and give me the lowest rates. When clients pitch the media business to an agency, the first question is, can you get me the lowest rate? So it's still going to be a buying-driven market. Now, the communications planning, is something on top of that. But really what drives the engine is the buying. So we've had many adventures and memorable moments when we were buying negotiating for P&G Media. Back then in 2001, it was still a very nascent sort of ground in terms of, oh, how do we really move from a propaganda tool to a marketing tool, the stations, no? So the likes of CCTV, I remember it was 2002. I asked them, because we were already trying to do branded entertainment back then, and they were surprised. They go, why do you need to meet our directors and producers? Well, because this is what we're doing. We're negotiating that you give us low unit cost for media. In return, we invest that money that we save into innovation, like branded entertainment, branded content or whatnot. So for them, it's like, oh yeah, well, yeah, this is the next level of it, right? So.
And they were receptive to this type of innovative thinking?
They were. CCTV, Hunan Satellite TV, even Jiangsu TV. Those were the early movers towards, branded content and innovation, going beyond just buying spots as a commodity. And you see them now, right? Hunan TV, all throughout, they've really exploded. It doesn't happen overnight. They themselves have to learn, how do we then move from, it being a commoditized propaganda tool into really influencing and touching consumer lives.
Now, Chinese clients are often cited as really requiring some literal and visual tools to help them imagine new concepts like this. Right. So, I mean, I would imagine you didn't go in with a one sheet and say, here's our idea. How did you really pitch these ideas in a compelling way?
Yeah, well, like you said, I had my visual aids. First step, I took examples from out of China, obviously, developed markets, and even in the Philippines, right? US examples on how to do branding in media. How do I, differentiate myself in media? It did not click right away, because for them it was like, I sell my spots today and I meet my volume goals, right? But over time, a period of 3, 4, 5 years, they realized that the media, essentially, the airtime that they have, especially on TV, is finite. So how do you create new revenue streams?
More value using the same quantity.
Right. Yeah. So now, back then, these corner logos, product placement still wasn't on. And they're learning now that, okay, we can really monetize this. Right?
And what was a huge breakthrough for yourself where you felt like you'd kind of accomplished a major stepping stone in moving them towards the direction that you had foreseen? Was there a moment where you're watching CCTV and there was a program on and you said, that was me, that's my signature,
Well, it was evolutionary more than revolutionary, but one of the early success stories we had were with Shanghai Media Group, CCTV, where this was in 2003 maybe, or 2004. Talent competitions were not that popular yet, so we co-produced one with Dragon TV. Again, a co-production deal. It was like pushing water uphill, really, because a lot of moving parts, and it was all new to them. But it finally went on air. It was branded content, one of our first forays into branded content space. And then from then on in, we did formats. China's Next Top Model, over Sichuan TV. See the guys, they see each other and they're like, we want to do that as well. Now, that's on the TV side. Online, on digital, we also had some pretty good breakthroughs. Again, 2003, 2004, where we really sort of improvised, because even at P&G, we did not really know how to navigate this digital space. So we did a lot of branded content online. Lee Yuchun, right? Supergirl, we used her for Crest. So we created, back then it was user-generated content that was popular. And then you see it, and you see the response, right? One thing, sidelight on the internet activities we did, our agencies did not really have everything planned out. But we saw from the response that it was just massive and impressive. So it was a learning for us that, oh wow, so next time we do this, we know what to watch out for.
So, I mean, when you're talking early days, 2003, 2004, how are you measuring the response, or how are you measuring the results? Was it the number? I mean, that's before Weibo and all of these things kind of took off. So how are you measuring this sort of response?
Well, we had no choice. We had to rely on the vendors themselves. We bought on a basically CPM online, cost per click, right, back then. That was just on the numbers. So we got the numbers and said, in terms of a cost per rating point, it meets our ROI standards. It was only later, towards 2008 and 9, when we developed something more qualitative. For example, we worked with Millward Brown to create an online panel for P&G. Basically, we could do both, researching on consumer insights, researching on what do you think about this idea, and beyond going beyond just the quantitative. You could have qualitative numbers. So we sort of, you won't get it perfect from day one, so we sort of mixed and matched our research tools and platforms. Until today, I think that P&G has a very robust measurement in terms of digital. Still not perfect though, but getting there.
But when we're talking about these breakthroughs now, it really seems like you were early movers. And still, branded content, these types of show formats you're talking about, really are still dominating a lot of what's going on in television.
Right.
And as you mentioned, online, there's been some breakthroughs, but has there been anything recently you've seen, modern day media directors now pushing the envelope further? Are they doing anything different, or are they still riding on the previous wave of innovation?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I've not seen any company or media unit or director that's really broken through and created something that sort of changes the game. One reason, I think, and a big reason, is that today's media manager or media job is actually fragmented now. Okay, like we mentioned earlier, you've got the planning, you've got the operations, you've got the buying. Most companies, P&G has moved, for one, the media buying goes to procurement department. Okay, the operations stays within the media team, tactical planning, and strategy or communications planning is most often done by the brand teams. So who really integrates those three? Because it's not like you're buying chemicals when you buy a media spot. That's all integrated. Okay? If I want to pay for a price, I need a return not just in the physical spot or rating point, but in terms of how it will build my equity. Okay? So, and no offense to purchasing people, but their skill set is buying phosphate or drums, right? How do you then link that to the entire process?
So what's your solution?
A solution is you hire a media director with those skill sets in those three buckets. Okay, it's easier said than done. But really, the foundation is a communications understanding, from the technical to the consumer and marketing aspect. Okay, and then that will open the capabilities towards the planning and the buying. You don't need actually somebody who will physically do all, but you need somebody who can integrate and have oversight over those three pieces of functionalities.
So how important is Mandarin fluency for a media director today compared to maybe 10, 15 years ago?
Right. Well, today it's certainly an enabler, but it should not be the be-all and end-all criterion, because I have some friends in the headhunting industry who, every time they look for a digital manager or a media manager, Mandarin speaking has to be the first criterion. Even companies, no? I would sort of change that search into really defining first what you're looking for, the hierarchy of the needs in your company, right? Obviously, if you're working for a company that focuses more on the planning or the buying or in terms of really integrating all pieces, that should be the first criterion. And then obviously the other criteria come in, like has to be forward-looking, internal controls compliant person, right? Solution-based, results-driven, some research and analytics, especially here in China, we don't have that much data, right? So that takes precedence over language skills.
Right, and I mean, other than going out and looking for these, heroes, these media directors that can kind of oversee the entire, those three buckets that you mentioned, is there any way that companies today can create a program where they can actually nurture that within the company? Because otherwise everybody would be fishing for the same few, as you said, rare people who can do that.
I wish companies could, but again, when I was at P&G, there was little or no training in terms of the media skills, huh? Brand building, marketing, yes, there were training modules, but there wasn't any. So I had to learn basically on my own. At the same time, I had to train my agencies both the planning agencies and the AOR agencies. So companies, I don't think have that, the sort of learning or training program in this specific skill set. So I guess the best enabler for these people would be select somebody who's sort of been in the industry for several years and at the same time has adapted those skills within the industry. And there are very few people now, especially because, again, the work has been fragmented.
Right. I mean, although you technically might qualify as one of these people. So, I mean, can you talk to us about what you're doing since you left P&G?
One of the companies I set up is all about building capability. We call it a learning lab, really, because in a learning lab, obviously you learn, at the same time you get to practice firsthand what you learn on real cases, and that's where the consultancy comes in. So it's still early stages, but it's really training, I guess, today's communications manager for today and the future, and not just how to estimate reach and frequency. Back in the day, we had to estimate reach and frequency by hand. Not too many people know that to do now. Agencies don't even know what a rating point is, or GRP. So the basics, as well as obviously the marketing discipline, consumer understanding, research analytics, some branded content, a more holistic training. That's a big task, right, given the churn of China today, right? But that's what we're trying to focus on.
And is there a specific client that you're targeting ideally? Is this domestic companies? Is this international companies? Both small, medium, large?
Right. Well, it's mostly companies based in China, right? I would want to say domestic companies from the advertiser side. But we're learning. We're seeing that even media vendors want to learn. And it's not just about how to get better revenues, right? It's about how to, for example, we're doing a branded content project with Guangxi Satellite TV. And they're positioning themselves as a beauty channel. So one look at their on-air promotions and we go, that's just slightly off that equity. So we said, what about we train you how to brand yourself along the lines of what you envision? And they're extremely receptive, very open-minded, and they go, yeah, please train us. Okay, so things like that where even the media vendors from TV to even magazines to even internet vendors are eager to learn. Okay, so we're sort of shifting a little bit of that focus towards the media companies in terms of that training. And of course, there's also this segment of the young kids today, right, fresh out of university, eager to learn, but really nobody teaches these skills in university. When you get to the workplace, they're given projects to take and run. Okay, so they become project managers. They don't become brand builders or communication experts anymore.
That's really interesting. So you're actually going to be tackling two sides of the problem. One side is on the advertiser side, but also you're looking at the talent crisis and actually thinking about how to solve that. That's very interesting.
Right. There's a big demand. If you look at these services, online services, or companies that have a lot of presence online recruiting students, that's just for study MBA or study abroad. It's amazing the traffic and the engagement it generates. But, you know, on specialized skills, right, that is forthcoming. There is that talent shortage. So we believe that their opportunity is to really create that platform because nobody really essentially has done it. Okay, the companies, like we mentioned earlier, they're sort of limited in their own internal capability building. Okay, and then the threat of, all right, I train you for a year, 2 years, and then you go leave, and the other company benefits. So there's a little bit of that selfishness as well. So at least the good thing here is if you train students, they come in and they can go, right? We know what we're setting up for. And for media vendors, I mean, they'll be there, right? So really, that's the vision we have. In fact, this is just an example, but even SARFT, for example. SARFT wants to learn how to do branded entertainment. So again, you customize the module for them. How do we train you on branded entertainment, which could have a multiplier effect benefiting the industry? If SARFT understood that we're doing product placements because of, they say, oh yeah, okay, so it's going to generate more, viewers, engagement, more product purchase, the whole industry benefits. Okay, we got that. So it's really grounding them on the benefits of what the media people, what the marketers are doing today. You know.
That wraps it up for today. Be sure to subscribe to us on Tudo and YouTube. You can also follow us on Weibo and Twitter and join our LinkedIn group. See you again.